Welcome once again to a new video in the series about the events of Jesus last week. And we are at one of the places where he had to come. Because this is where one of the turning points in history took place. Specifically, this is where the betrayal happened. This is where the kiss of betrayal happens. This is where they eat. This is where the dinner he so wanted to have with his disciples takes place. There were several days of tension, several days of work for Jesus, even though he was coming from a day of rest, because yesterday he took his rest with his people, with his disciples, with those he loved. Meanwhile, as we saw in the previous episode, the plot behind the scenes was unfolding. Finally, exactly today, that plot comes to a close. It ends up working out. And the key, could we say, was the kiss? The kiss didn't happen here. What did happen here is that here the rest of the disciples are told the name of the traitor. Here the traitor is revealed. The one who walked with Jesus from the very beginning, the one who managed the team's finances, the one who was possibly the most trusted man of all. Because he was the one who managed you. What is it like to make ends meet? How do we get to the next project? He managed absolutely everything.
He managed, I think it was the last chance he had to repent, to turn back.
Of the month?
To change his mind, but still, well, he made the wrong decision anyway.
Scriptures leave many things unsaid. There are many details that obviously can't be written down, but I think, thinking about it, I believe he was really threatened. Regardless, because many of us think that he gave in for a bag of money. It's true, the Bible tells us it was a bag of money because that's how the prophecy had to be fulfilled. But I don't think that was the only reason. I believe he was seriously threatened by those religious people. Really, one of the worst things that can happen to you here is being removed from your family, not being recognized as a Jew anymore. Possibly that's where the threat against him came from. We're going to uproot your family. We're going to take away your entire future. You're no longer counted among us. And for the Jewish people, for someone who is Jewish, to be told that they're no longer Jewish, it's something you can't change because you're born with it and you'll die with it. So telling you that is something you can't overcome because back then, being Jewish, just like today, means belonging. It's a symbol of belonging. It's a symbol of, well, look at everything Israel suffers around the world. Would it be easy to end all of this by saying, that's it, we're not Jewish anymore? We sell our birthright like someone did, right? And then that's it, the conflict is over. But since it's something you can't undo, I think they got to him from that angle. They used that kind of threat and other kinds of threats too, which ultimately ended up cornering him. And he had to do what he had to do because scripture had to be fulfilled in him. We are right here in this place known as the upper room, which has some variations. Names, upper room, cenacle. What else is it called?
The Last Supper hall, right?
The Hall of the Last Supper. It's just that other events also happened here that aren't specifically related to the last week. Maybe another time, or maybe you can write in the comments what the other two events are that happened in this hall, in the Hall of the Last Supper. As we mentioned at some point in the episodes, we're making these recordings during tense days in the city of Jerusalem. Unfortunately, many sites are closed.
Nosotros.
We managed to get up to the terrace of this place, so how about we start here? Yes.
That's interesting. We hadn't been up here before either.
At least I hadn't.
So it's really nice.
We turned the camera so it feels like you're coming with us. Remember that this is unedited footage. It's a single shot from beginning to end, so that's where we're going to turn the camera. Some people call this a shot, right? It's just the camera filming from start to finish. I think there was a movie like that, right?
Anyway.
Also, I'm telling you, Laura, you can tell. There aren't any people around here because not even the cleaning staff are here. Look, everything is dirty. We just came up. Everything is dirty around here. They don't come to clean, so there are some kids here. How can this girl be barefoot? You know why they're here, Lore? Because there are people living here. Look, yes.
These are their little houses?
Yes. Anyway, we're on the terrace of what's known as the upper room. There you can see the dome of the upper room, the cenacle. Let's go there behind the dome to see what it looked like. Let's imagine ourselves 2,000 years ago. Throughout these episodes, we've explained that in Jerusalem there were a lot of people during these days because it was the eve of Passover, the Pesach festival. In the Hebrew language?
Yes.
And so, Jesus, let's recall the route a bit. He came from there, from the Mount of Olives. The first day he appears on the scene in the city of Jerusalem, he was coming from Galilee. He arrives at the Mount of Olives, He leaves and stays at the house of someone who was his friend, one of his best friends. The Bible refers to him as his best friend in Bethany.
Lazarus.
Did you remember? That's good. You remember Lazarus had two sisters, Martha and Mary. Then the scriptures tell us that he goes down to Jerusalem. That is, he is going to enter Jerusalem in one of those days. Then he returns again to Bethany. In summary, he was in Bethany for about 3 days before having the dinner that took place here. Lore, should we read the scriptures?
Yes, yes.
It would be really nice to remember exactly what happened there.
Here, because I have it for the wind. Yes, because there's wind. Yes, this one. Let's read from Matthew 26, starting at verse 17. 7. Okay, on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He told them, "Go into the city and speak to a certain man. The teacher says, 'My time is near at your house.' I will celebrate Passover with my disciples," and the disciples did as Jesus commanded them and prepared the Passover. When night came, he sat at the table with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they were greatly saddened, and each one of them began to say to him, "Is it I, Lord?" Then he answered and said, "The one who dips his hand with me in the dish, he will betray me. Truly the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better if that man had never been born." Entonces, Judas, the one who betrayed him, answered, "Is it me, teacher?" And he said to him, "You have said so." And while they were eating, Jesus took the bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. And he said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And taking the cup and having given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. And I tell you that from now on I will not drink of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." I continue. And when they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
There it is. Ready? Then from there, we're going to go over there because that's another episode. We'll continue over there because as you could see, we're following the route of Jesus, tracing the steps of Jesus. We could also say that, but actually it's a sequence. That happens here in this place. Remember and try to imagine 2,000 years ago, there were a lot of people here. There were Jews who lived in different parts of the world. They even lived in Persia.
Obviously.
Yes, it's Iraq, as mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And they came all the way here. They traveled many kilometers to get here, and as we saw in the previous episode, many of them arrived here, even when they were sick. Of course.
Because they also had hope, something specific.
Exactly, that on Pesach. What is also remembered is the time of miracles, the time of liberation, even though the liberation from slavery is remembered. But for them, it also always meant a hope for a new beginning, a new start, a new year was beginning, something new was starting, and here, precisely for the Lord, it was the beginning of the end. This scene was the last one for him, yes.
The beginning of the end, as you said.
It's true, he never did it again. He didn't even have breakfast with them. It was his last scene. That's why, as we saw in the previous episode, he must have really enjoyed that time, right? Yes, being with them. He himself says it. They must have laughed a lot. Yes.
He himself says it. I really wished for it, yes. And he also realized that this was the end of those 33 years for him. It really was the end. In the end, not just as a person, right? But as if to finish my work, the work for which he was brought into the world.
Without a doubt, just think about it. And I don't know if we ever did. Did any of you watching us from the other side ever stop to think while you're there, watching the images from above? And you can see there East Jerusalem, and on the other side, right here, just on this other side, here, right here, West Jerusalem. On one side, the Jewish people live here, and down here is Silwan, where the Pool of Siloam was. All of that's where the Arab people live today, right? So what I was saying is, just think about it. You spent 3 years walking with him, with Jesus, the one you believed in. All the disciples believed he was the Savior, the Liberator. That in him, they were going to find the way out of the oppression of the culture that was besieging them at that time. Let's remember that they didn't just come here for the celebration. Pesach, but when you came from so far away, and many people who went so far away, they left. Precisely because of what was happening in the city of Jerusalem in those days. Jerusalem was in chaos during those days. It was a place that did not represent God. God no longer dwelled inside there. God was walking among the people, and the people didn't realize that he was walking with them. He walked here about 3 years ago, but no longer dwelled here. He was not inside the temple area or the site of the Holy of Holies.
Inside the Ark of the Covenant.
Wasn't it better not to be there? Exactly. It was only there that you had to receive forgiveness once a year, because that's how it was back then. But there was no longer an Ark of the Covenant. At that time,
it hadn't been like that for a long time.
And that's why John also tells us that he himself, John the Baptist, went and lived in the desert area, because there were many strange things happening here in the city of Jerusalem. The Sanhedrin and all those religious leaders had corrupted themselves and had taken the law into their own hands. It's like they, in a way, dressed themselves as God. They took on God's garments and started making all the decisions.
They also knew that the ark really wasn't there, which for them was obviously the representation of the presence.
That!
They had to do something no matter what, because otherwise it would fall apart.
Yes.
The thing is, of course, they didn't realize that Jesus himself came to complete, to fulfill, to bring an end to that era they had. It's not like, oh, well, there's no ark and that's it, we get sad. But the answer was right in front of their eyes, and they didn't recognize, so to speak, the ark's replacement. Because actually everything was planned that way. It wasn't going to be needed anymore.
Everything had to be fulfilled too, right? One might ask today, why did it happen that way? There was no other way. There was no other plan. There was no other, but everything had to happen according to the scriptures. Imagine Jesus walking around here. God, in other words, the creator of the heavens and the earth, walking around here. And eating with them, obviously he loved them. Without a doubt, he felt sadness in his human heart. That he was going to suffer the most anyone could suffer, and he had already told this to his disciples. It is necessary for this to happen. Thank you.
I think that Jesus also had to trust too. Because you see, sometimes you say, well, what can people learn in 3 years?
Actually,
when you go to school, it's 7 years in elementary, 5 years in, and 3 years, and ordinary people. How can you be sure that they were able to grasp all of that? But I also think that experience, what they felt, that revelation they had, Nothing could take that away from them. So from there, we can understand that Jesus could be at peace, that his work with them was now done. Now what I need is to complete the work I came for, which is to die and rise again.
Exactly. Well, to summarize then, the place we are actually standing on, which is beneath us. Unfortunately, as we said at the beginning, many of the sites are closed due to the conflict we are currently experiencing with Iran. Possibly at some point this video will be history, right? Because the conflict is going to last permanently, yes.
The conflict will end and we will see the new chapter afterwards.
Yes, what will happen next? What will happen the next time we record in the Cenacle? Or maybe some of you will be walking with us and entering the building and being able to enjoy it. Thank you. All of this that we are showing you through the screen and that you yourselves can see it with your own eyes.
That is definitely going to happen.
Exactly. I mean, the Lord was here. His disciples were here. It was nighttime. Let's remember, it was the most important dinner during the 7-day feast of unleavened bread. Let's remember an interesting fact. It says there that the feast of unleavened bread was approaching and they asked him, "Where do you want us to eat this Pesach?" This Passover. So, for many who don't know the meaning of Pesach, we're talking about 3 feasts in 1 week, or 3 important celebrations, or 3 different explanations in 1 week. For some, they are different names for the same holiday, but it's not the same name. They are different names. One thing is unleavened bread, and unleavened bread, if we go back to the book of Exodus, we're told that they had to cook quickly, take what they had with them, because there was no time for the bread to rise. And so they had to leave in a hurry. And so that was the unleavened bread. And that night was the night of the Passover lamb, when they had to roast the Passover lamb, because it was the night of the final event, when the angel of death would come. And all those who had the sign of the blood on their wall were spared. The firstborn could continue sleeping peacefully that night. But there was a lot of screaming, a lot of crying. Imagine waking up in the morning and going to wake up the firstborn. Surely there were many Hebrews who didn't listen to what Moses said and lost their firstborn, who stopped breathing that night, right? So that's Pesach. The Bible reminds us that Pesach is passage in the Hebrew language, which means to pass over. In English, it's called Passover. Passage. Passover is Passover to pass. Over. In Spanish, no. In Spanish, it's called Pascua, unfortunately. Yes, it was changed. There's not much meaning. There's no linguistic link to the word Pascua. But with Pesach and English, it can be understood well. Pesach is passage, to pass over, because that's exactly it. The angel comes, sees the blood, and moves on.
And moves on, exactly.
He passed over that house. That's Pesach, the meaning of Pesach specifically.
Better amalash passage.
Exactly.
And the angel passed. Exactly. There's another event I wanted to remind you of, another event that did happen here, which we didn't read now because, well, we didn't want to make this too long, but there was also the moment when Jesus washed their feet.
To the disciples.
Initially, Peter said to him, "No, you won't wash me. If I don't wash your feet, you will have no part with me. Wash all of me, Lord."
No.
Just the feet, because you were already purified. That was also a sign of humility. I think that the disciples, yes, during those 3 years, they never stopped being surprised, one surprise after another, with Jesus. He always had a new story, a different point of view. And by doing this, it must have been, too much. Because he, when they understood that he is the Son of God, suddenly washes our feet. He becomes like the most humble person. So, is it?
But even so, remember that history shows us that they even believed, ate, and let their feet be washed. They realized someone would betray them and that all Old Testament prophecies were being fulfilled in him. Hours later, he ends up saying, "I don't know him." I was never with him. I don't know him. What do you mean? So that's why I say the social pressure back then was so strong within the Jewish community that today we can't even imagine what the consequences were for these people. Death could have been the consequence. So that's why I think that Judas was not only tempted financially, the temptation was the reason for getting involved. But once you got involved, they already had you, and he couldn't turn back anymore. That's why, notice that what happened with him was that he went and handed over the money.
Sí.
He went to return it, but it was too late. Anyway, let's move on to another episode. Let's walk through this incredible week that Jesus went through 2,000 years ago, which has stories of tension, stories of joy, stories of sadness, stories of pressure, stories of signs, of questions that still remain unanswered for us. There are still many questions we ask ourselves that seem illogical to us. Why does one gospel say one thing? Why does another gospel say something else? What details are hidden from us? Nothing is hidden, there are just different perspectives. Each person shares their view. What I see differs from what you see. We simply see things differently. I write what I see, you write what you see. Maybe the timing isn't exactly the same because I'm writing at one time and you're writing at another time. And so that's what might cause some kind of confusion, but there's no mistake in the sequence. There's no mistake in the sequence. Jesus' last week was when key events unfolded that would lead to the final point, death on the cross. And from there, to wait for the fulfillment, the great fulfillment. So that's where we end today's episode. The site of the Last Supper. We were on the terrace, we were on the roof, and remember to write down what the other two events that took place here were, the place of the upper room. And from here we continue. We are going to go to the place where they were as well. Denying him, I wanted to tell you, yes, but actually we were already in that place because it was where the conspiracy took place. From here, we are specifically going to go to Gethsemane, to the episode, perhaps one of the most intense episodes of this week. So I'll see you there, okay? See you. Yes, get ready because that's where we're headed. Meanwhile, you can see a little more over there of what we have to see.